everyone. Welcome to Greece Public Library's Book Break. I'm Kirstra. I'm one of the librarians at the library. I am the moderator of the Pints and Prose book discussion group, as well as the virtual science fiction and fantasy book discussion group.
And hi, I'm Claire. I am the moderator of As the Page Turns, one of our book discussion groups, as well as the virtual historical fiction book group on Facebook.
Cool. And today, in honor of Mother's Day upcoming, we have some books for you that are loosely on a theme of mothers or motherhood. Claire, do you want to start?
Sure. I'll start with one that I really loved and my book group had read before, called The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane by Lisa C. This one is a great one, not just for mothers, but also for book groups. And Lisa C has a lot of great resources on her website about the book and the research and everything she did about the people and the tea. So, and also a suggestion if you want to have a tea party or a tea sampling party, which I think would be kind of fun for Mother's Day. So the setting is a remote village in China in their tea growing region. Believe it or not, it's set in 1988. And when you start reading this book, literally, you're going to think you're way back in time, because the people have kind of been isolated and very primitive. So they, their life is encased in like rituals and different things that they pass down. So it's much more traditional and very much like they had not seen an automobile until someone came looking for tea. I mean, very, very, different than what you would expect. So the main characters we have several different mother-daughter relationships in this book. The first one is Amma, who is the woman that, midwife. She's a midwife in the town, which gives her an esteemed position in the village, but yet she's still lower than all the men. Her daughter, who is Li Yan, and Li Yan is very much interested in education, not your typical girl, always kind of questioning, looking for ways, and very much interested in what she can do. And then eventually there will be Haley, who is Li Yan's daughter, and then Haley's adoptive mother. So there's a lot of different mother-daughter relationships in this book. So basically Li Yan falls in love with a man who her parents do not approve of. She has a baby out of wedlock, which in the tradition of their people, she would have killed the baby. Mm. She chose not to go that route. She doesn't really want to part with her, but she ends up putting one of her little tea cakes from her family, wraps her up and leaves her outside of an orphanage in a nearby city. So that becomes Haley, the little girl, who ends up being adopted by an American family, and she lives in California in a very pretty much affluent lifestyle, but she still struggles with the fact that she is adopted. She looks different from her parents, a lot of her peers at school. So her story is kind of told in opposing chapters from Li Yan's, but it's done through letters and homework assignments and even like a therapy visit, like the transcription of the visit. And then eventually you get to hear her own voice in the story. So I don't want to give too much of the plot away, but of course these two women, Li Yan, who gets over, she has her daughter, but she ends up getting more educated. She has her own business. She does eventually find love with a wonderful man. So their paths will converge in the future. So I don't want to give too much away, but it's a great story about relationships, mothers, and the bond that they have, even though they may be separated. Because both of these women were affected by this choice in different ways and thought about each other their whole lives.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. It sounds like an interesting structure with all of the different like transcripts and letters and things in there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the adopted daughter's story. And it was an interesting way to kind of portray her life, for the most part. Mm-hmm. She gets old enough to, to speak for herself. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
So The books I chose, I went for a slightly different mother theme. As I was perusing my bookshelves, I realized that most of my books are with like absent mothers or evil mothers or terrible mothers. And I was like, that is not what I'm looking for Mother's Day, a celebration of mothers. So I decided I would choose books that make me think of my mother, that have some connection for me in my life to my mom. So the first one, I actually have two series and one standalone book. So the first series, I have just one of them, is the Tony Hillerman, Joe Lee Porn and Jim Chi mysteries. So this is book like 11 in the series, but the first book in the series is called The Blessing Way. It was released in 1970. So it is an older series, although it's also quite a long series. So it spans quite a fair bit of time. But these are mysteries, specifically procedurals, that are set in New Mexico and Arizona on Navajo reservations. So Joe Lee Porn and Jim Chi are both part of the Native police or tribal police.
Okay.
And they investigate various crimes on the reservations. And a lot of them have some sort of tie to either Navajo religion or mysticism, or just in general Navajo culture, which was really interesting for me to learn about. And we used to do a lot of road trips, and we would always get audiobooks. So we listened to a lot of Tony Hillerman in the car on these like very long road trips. So that's a nice memory that I have of my mom. But I've gone back and reread most of the series at some point or another. But they're nice, they're good procedurals. So it's all investigating some sort of crime, often a murder, because, you know, that's how mysteries go.
Did his daughter start writing or take up? Yeah.
Yeah, she took over just within the last few years. I think he passed, and his daughter, I believe it's Anne Hillerman.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
Kept up the series. So she's publishing additional books in the series under her own name at this point. So, and a bunch of these are available on Hoopla in both audio and ebook formats. So highly recommend the audio for these.
Awesome. Well, you know, I like memoirs, so I don't have a physical copy of this one, but it is available on ebook and in audio format on Hoopla, and it's called Pure Heart by Troy Ball, a spirited tale of grace, grit, and whiskey. So this is a story of a mother who lives in Texas. Sounds like they're pretty affluent, but she and her husband, who's like a real estate developer in Texas, have two sons, with both of whom are disabled and have a lot of medical needs. I believe they can't speak, they're in wheelchairs, and the one has a lot of trouble breathing with Texas dust. It was not a good combination. So the last straw for her is a hospital trip with him with pneumonia, really struggling for air, and they decide they're going to move southeast, somewhere to a totally different climate, mountains, and they start researching and come across Asheville, North Carolina. And you know me and my Appalachian love, so I picked up this book. So they moved to Asheville, which is kind of if you've ever been there, it's a funky city. It's got a lot of breweries. It's got a very different vibe, very fun. But people accepted them, and one of her neighbors, his name was Forrest Jarrett, brought over a gift of a jar of moonshine. So at first she didn't like it. Texas Christian background, so it was kind of interesting that this woman would ever become a moonshine distiller, which is what she was, but it's very legit, and they're still running, I believe, in Asheville. So anyway, she goes through like back and forth with him about this moonshine, and he finally tells her Well, you may not like that, but I bet you're going to like this one. It's the Pure Heart, which is a distilling term for like a certain process of the whiskey development. So sure enough, she loves it. She serves it to her sister, and she starts this journey of now her boys are in their 20s. They're doing well. She has part-time care. She's almost 50 or is 50, and she decides she's going to embark on a career to become a moonshine distiller. So she discovers like heirloom farms with corn for her product, and just the way she interacts with the people in the town, her sons, and she names it Troy and Sons is the name of her business to kind of honor her boys for the journey that they took there. And the fact that her business gave her income to get care and everything for them. And I believe her husband started working for the business as well. But it was just kind of funny. It was a fun story. It was a very quick read. Probably would be good to listen to as well. So Troy Ball, Pure Heart, A Spirited Tale of Grace, Grit, and Whiskey. So
very cool.
Hood tale.
Nice.
Place.
Yeah, I feel like moonshine is kind of having like a little bit of a moment. Like,
yeah,
go into the liquor store, there's all kinds of like little craft brewery moonshine.
Yeah, there's when I went to Nashville with my daughter, there was oh gosh, I can't think of the name of the place now, but you could get like a lemonade with a moonshine caboose. Cafe. So, and they have different flavors of it too, like apple pie moonshine or whatever. So yeah, I think it is kind of, it's not the backwoods mountain still anymore. It's very mainstream, like you say, and it's definitely taken on a new ambiance in today's world.
Yeah, very cool. So my next series is Elizabeth Peters, the Amelia Peabody series. So Elizabeth Peters is a pen name for Barbara Michaels, who wrote a lot of mostly romance, I think, sort of lighter fiction. But she has 2 or 3 different series under the name Elizabeth Peters, and the Amelia Peabody series is by far the longest series. This is the second book in the series. I don't own a copy of the first one, but the first one is called Crocodile on the Sandbank. So these books are set in Victorian England and Egypt. So our main character, Amelia Peabody, is a Victorian woman. She gets an inheritance and decides to use it to travel and see the world, which she hasn't been able to do before. So on her travels, she goes to Egypt. She really falls in love with Egypt and the landscape and the ancient Egyptian culture, and sort of becomes a lady Egyptologist. And over the course of the series, she becomes an archaeologist in her own right. And so in the first book, she meets the man who will become her husband, Radcliffe Emerson. And I have to tell you, like, Amelia Peabody and Radcliffe Emerson is one of the great literary pairings of all time. So they start, and it's kind of like a screwball comedy. Like, they drive each other crazy. Like, she's poking in, trying to learn about stuff, and he's like, "Woman, get out of my way. Like, what are you doing?" But over the course of the first book and the rest of the series, they really grow to respect each other deeply and love each other. And it's great because they fight and they disagree, but at the end of the day, they have like really this deep respect for each other that comes through their entire relationship in every book. So this is another series that I would listen to with my mom, again, on these like interminable car trips that we went on every summer. But they're great. I usually refer to them, so they're a little bit popcorny, like they're very light. Each one has like a central mystery to it, but there is like an overarching like the course of their lives between books. But there's also some substance there, so I like to call it my gourmet popcorn. And these books are really any of the Elizabeth Peters, but I love the Amelia Peabody ones particularly. They're great like vacation books. Because they're quick, they're easy to pick up and put down. You don't have to invest huge amounts of brain power in them, but there is a little more substance there.
It's funny, my mom was also a big mystery writer, a reader. So, you know, I think our moms have a big part in liking to read, and also we like to read even now, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So.
for sure.
All right. So my last one is a more modern one. It's called Such a Fun Age. This one is a debut novel. It was picked, you can see, for the Reese Witherspoon Book Club. So I don't know if this one will be on TV at some point, you know, it wouldn't surprise me, but it was really interesting. Although there were a lot of, you know, the main underlying thing is different racial treatment in America. So just to give you a brief overview, one of the main characters is Alex Chamberlain, who is a very well-to-do woman. She is a blogger turned entrepreneur. She is married to a newscaster, very brand driven. And so they have a child, and she's looking for a babysitter, and she hires a young Black woman to watch her daughter, who is their nanny. Well, her husband, the newscaster, happens to make a racially kind of derogatory comment on his news broadcast. And I believe a brick flies through their window one night. So he calls the babysitter to come and get her daughter out of the house while they clean up the mess and try to call the police and figure out what is going wrong. So the babysitter takes the young girl, whose name is Briar, to a local kind of market that's open in the city. Now it's late, and she had been out at like a dance club. So she's not dressed in babysitting attire. She's dressed as a young 20-something woman in her dance attire, you know. So when she's in the store with the little girl Briar, she's approached by another patron and a security guard who thinks that she's kidnapped the baby because she is Black and the young girl is white. So this starts the whole thing. You're like starting off with a bang. And while this interaction is taking place, a young man is filming the encounter because he says to the girl, "You may want this someday because this is not right, you know, what's going down." And she ends up calling the dad, who comes, and, you know, they settle everything. But just, you can see the basic inequality in the fact that she had to get him in order to get out of the situation, because they weren't going to take her word for it. And then as she grows throughout the novel, the interaction actually between the mom and her daughter, the daughter is she's very different, very precocious. And that's one reason why the babysitter loves her so much. She is so different, but she can see how the mom has trouble relating to her. So there's a lot of themes here of women's friendship, mothers and daughters, of course, the racial issues, and just the kind of underlying currents that are into today's society. Like I said, it would make an excellent book club choice, and definitely a more modern pick, a younger pick with younger characters. So very good, very interesting. Like, it's one of those things that once you pick it up, you just start blasting through. And of course, there's a lot of other things happening as well. And, you know, so yeah, that was my third one.
Nice. That one's been getting a lot of buzz.
Yes.
I think, right?
Yeah. I think as soon as Reese picks something, it gets a lot of buzz to begin
Blows
with.
up.
Yeah, definitely. And this one, it wasn't just her, it was a lot of people. I think a debut novel. I like reading debut novels too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Nice.
yeah.
So my last book is Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. I really like Daphne du Maurier. So she was writing from like the 30s all the way up into the 70s. Jamaica Inn was her fourth book, the one she wrote directly before Rebecca, which is probably her most famous book, I would say. There's also a movie adaptation, or it might have been a TV movie adaptation from the late 80s with Jane Seymour and Trevor Eve, who are like my mother's favorites. So we watched, I think we had that movie taped off of TV and we watched it all the time. So I don't think I actually read the book until I was probably in my 20s, but I was familiar with the story from this movie adaptation. So Jamaica Inn is about this young woman named Mary Yellen. She grows up on a farm with her mother, and when she's about 20, her mother gets ill and passes away. And before she dies, her mother makes Mary promise that she won't stay and try to run the farm on her own, that she'll go to live with her Aunt Patience, who is her mother's sister, in Cornwall. So that she won't have sort of the burden of trying to run a farm. She'll go live with her family and they'll take care of her. So she just gets on a coach and rides to Cornwall. She has sold the family farm. And it turns out that her aunt is no longer living in the town that she thought. She now lives in Jamaica Inn, which is this big sort of spooky old inn on the coast in Cornwall. And it's got a really bad reputation. Like from the beginning, the coach driver is like, look, you're a single girl. I don't want to leave you here. Like, let me take you anywhere else. Please don't get out of the coach here. She's like, no, it's fine. This is my aunt and uncle. I'm good. So she gets off of the coach and again, so it's this big old spooky building. It's an inn, but no one ever stays there. So it's right on the main coach route. None of the coaches will stop there. No one from town comes there. Occasionally on like a particular night, her aunt will tell her, stay in your room tonight. Like no matter what you hear, don't come out. And there will be all of these people in the inn and being rowdy, and she has no idea what's going on, but you know from the beginning that it's not good.
Yeah.
So it's another very atmospheric book. It's set like on the coast and on the moors. It's very isolated and just very claustrophobic at the same time, because Mary is essentially trapped there at the end. She has nowhere to go. So her uncle is like this scary, drunken, scary man. Her Aunt Patience, who she remembers as like this very sort of happy, charming young woman, has turned into like a shadow of herself who just hides away. And there's like an albino pastor, and there's the uncle's younger brother who is some sort of scofflaw, and she doesn't quite know whether to trust him, even though she's attracted to him at the same time. And there's just sort of this kind of mounting feeling of dread throughout the book until you figure out what's actually happening at Jamaica Inn, which I will not spoil, even though the book, again, is almost 100 years old at this point. No spoilers. But you find out what's really happening, and it's just like a page turn to the end. Like, you've got to find out what happens to Mary, whether she manages to get out of the situation, who is good, who is bad. No one is as they seem. So I think this book was actually adapted to the screen at least 3 or 4 times. There was a mini series that came out just a couple of years ago on, I want to say it was PBS.
Mhm.
They did a newer adaptation. So there are some great movie versions out there. It really lends itself to that sort of atmospheric, like sweeping views of the moors and stormy seas at night.
Yeah.
And it's great. I love it. One
Oh,
of my favorites.
cool. I know Rebecca is a lot of people's favorite book.
Mhm.
That always comes up on a lot of lists.
Yeah, I love that one too. I reread that one and Jamaica Inn probably every couple of years.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, they never get old.
I'll have to pick one of those up. That sounds good.
Mhm. Yeah. Rebecca so it was published in 1938, I believe, and it's definitely set more contemporaneously. So Jamaica Inn was set, like 150 years before.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
but so Rebecca is definitely like the more modern of the two.
Yeah.
But this is like your gothic damsel in distress
Yeah.
kind of book. So,
Okay. Sounds good.
so I hope you all appreciate your mothers for Mother's Day and think about, how your mom has played into your love of reading and your book taste, as Claire was talking about earlier. Maybe give your mom a book for Mother's Day that means something to you. Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, me too.
So we will see you next week. Happy reading, and we will see you soon.
Take care.